Hey everybody, we're out here on the beautiful beaches of BC today, and I don't normally wear sunglasses, and they're probably not going to be the best thing to wear for a night vision review, which is why we're not reviewing night vision today. Today we're going to be looking at a night vision mount, and this is the all-new Nocturn Industries Alpha Mount. And I believe this is one of the most forward-thinking mounts, if not the most forward-thinking mount on the market today. So we've had this Alpha mount in particular for a few months now from Nocturn. We got it in January for us to do some heavy use and testing on it. Me and the rest of the CHS staff have definitely put some use on this guy, taken it out for hikes, force and force events, demos, all that stuff. We've also just been playing around with it at work, using it as a very, very, very expensive fidget toy, and putting it through its paces to see how it wears, to see if it develops any wobble over time. More on that in a little bit. So first off, let's go over the design of the thing. The thing that I really love about the Alpha mount is it's going to be an in-house design from Nocturn that encompasses their ultra lightweight philosophy. There's going to be a lot of mounts out there that you probably know of that are quite, let's just say, inspired by other existing mounts out there. But the Alpha mount is going to be, as you can see, a very unique design. Going with Nocturn's other products, they really capitalized on reducing as much weight as possible from this mount. I don't have the weight on me off the top of my head, but I'm going to put them up here compared to other mounts on the market. This is going to be by far the lightest night vision mount on the market. They've even went so far as to skeletonize the rear of the mount that attaches to your shroud. Not something that I've seen before from any other company, and they've gone so far as to skeletonize the tilt adjustment and everything like that. However, one thing that they did not compromise on was strength and rigidity. So when we first saw this mount, I believe in SHOT Show 2024, it was definitely very new on the market and a very early prototype. It was designed by Nick, the very genius brainchild of this mount at Nocturn Industries. And when we first saw it, I was like, wow, this is really light, but it's not the most sturdy thing on the market right now. It's a little bit wobbly. I'm not sure if something this thin could actually have that stiffness and rigidity that most users are looking for. A lot of users are going to be looking for a mount that tries to eliminate as much slop as possible. And honestly, they did a really good job with this. I'm going to get into that a little bit later. So before we get into how they did it, because I think that's really magical, let's go over the features of the mount. It's going to be very simple. You're going to have your standard mount adjustments. So this one over here, this example is going to be a push button, stow, and deploy. So you push this button over here, it stows like so, and then you push it again, and then whoop, it deploys down. Very, very much like other mounts on the market. It's also going to have a button over here on the side to adjust the distance of travel. What I really like about it is it's very smooth, the button is very tactile, it's pretty big, and it's textured so that you know where it is. And of course, you're also going to have a button here that adjusts the ride height of the nod. So if you have a taller housing, then you can move the mount up. If you have a shorter and more slim housing, like a lot of the Nocturn housings out there, or fixed bridge housing, you can move it down to whatever height you see fit. And then you're going to have over here the tilt adjustment knob, which, like most night vision, you're going to have to tilt it to make sure it's angled properly with your helmet and your eyes to get the most out of your image. Of course, one more thing is going to be this button over here. It's very nice, big, and tactile, which is going to be the release for the nod itself. And of course, over here, you're going to have the lockout in the back. This also has breakaway, so if you put it on this mode over here, it'll have less of a braking force for high angle operations if you need to make sure you protect your neck so that the nod mount breaks off of your helmet shroud before your neck breaks off of your head, which obviously would not be a good thing. This can also be locked out like this so that it needs a much greater amount of braking force for the breakaway to engage, and it's basically locked in there until you take a very, very severe bump. So you guys can use that to your discretion. One thing that I really like about this mount is how much they reduced slop. Like I said earlier, people are always looking for tighter and better fitting night vision mounts, and they want to reduce as much wobble as possible. Now, it being a moving mechanism, you're always going to need some tolerance for having a little bit of wobble on it, because if you use this in sand, as you can probably see around me on this beach, snow, ice, and stuff like that, you don't want it to be so tight that you have to force it on and off and it doesn't lock, but you also don't want that slop where it's moving unnecessarily, causing wear on the device and making the movement worse over time. So on all of these adjustment points, they actually have included little nylon screws so you can tighten down the amount of wobble that the carriages have. So over here on the adjustment point that adjusts the forward and rearwards throw of the shoe over here, they have two nylon tip screws so that you can adjust how much wobble that the shoe has. As you can see here, this shoe has minimal wobble. In fact, this is a perfect amount, I think. It still slides up and down without any force, but when it locks in place, there's no wobble. It's going to be the same thing on the height adjustment right below the button, you're going to have these tiny screws over here, nylon tipped yet again, so that you can adjust the amount of friction that you have between the interfacing points. Now, when you're adjusting these screws, a little bit goes a long way. If you turn it all the way, you're going to basically have a very, very fixed mount. You won't be able to move it at all. If you just turn it a little bit, sometimes you just need to touch it to add enough tension, and I think it's good to go. Out of box, it does come well adjusted, but over time, as parts wear in, you can adjust those things to your liking. The rearwards of the mount, I have a cool Wendy Star helmet here. Actually fits really well on this helmet. This is a molded shroud, of course, but there's no wobble in the fit of this helmet. They've done that intentionally. For this mount, you're going to actually have to give a little bit more of a press to fit it in versus other mounts. So it doesn't just click in willy-nilly, you're going to have to press it. And like I said, that was intentional to reduce the amount of wobble that the mount has. Over here, you're going to see some rearwards rubber pads. These can actually be taken out, as you might have seen in the SHOT Show demo, if you need a little bit more give. Or you can shim it a little bit with additional material if you need to be even tighter, although I don't think that has been a problem with this mount so far. Alright, so we're back in the studio to do a quick comparison of these three mounts in terms of adjustability. In their closest shoe adjustment range, you can see that the A4 and the Nocturn are very similar, whereas the Cadex does get a fair bit closer. If we look at the farthest adjustment range, the Nocturn actually gets the farthest out from your eyes, followed by the Cadex and then the A4. Now looking at it side by side, the differences can be a little bit more apparent when I put this on my head. I will say for all of these videos, I was getting the full image of the tube with RPO glass through my eyes. The A4 and the Nocturn were very similar in terms of their closest distance, whereas the Cadex, I can get it so close to the point where it's basically touching my eyelashes, so I'd actually probably adjust it a bit further than this for realistic use. Now in terms of adjusting it out all the way, the A4 is the most modest in this case, whereas the Cadex and the Alpha adjusted the furthest to the point where I thought it was actually a bit ridiculous. So for all my guys using Avons, if you guys are still using those old Locust goggles or any big forms of eye pro, both the Cadex and the Alpha have you a bit more covered than other legacy mounts on the market. Now in terms of stowage angle, we're looking at two comparisons here. One is with these Manticore polymers deployed and stowed up, and as you can see, the Alpha mount is going to have the smallest stowed deployment position, and of course this also translates to when you articulate the tubes. In fact, the Alpha tubes are basically touching the helmet, and when you're wearing this on your head, it actually makes a huge difference, bringing the night vision center of gravity a lot closer to your neck, and therefore causing a lot less head strain over time. The last comparison I want to get into is going to be the height adjustment. Now there's lots of different goggles on the market with varying heights. Some are very tall and some are very short. I've excluded the Cadex from this comparison because if you watched my previous video, you know the Cadex has a special feature where you can remove the rear plate and adjust its height to a larger degree than any other mount on the market. So that is going to obviously be the king of different height adjustments. However, looking at these two mounts where they don't have that feature, the Alpha beats out legacy mounts and actually can go not only higher than legacy mounts, but can also go lower, giving you a larger range of adjustment for both the height and the throw of your night vision goggle. Now, one thing I also want to point out is that on the Alpha, the height adjustment is actually notched on the side of basically what I like to call the spine of the mount. So if this mount takes a bump, your height will not be affected by any sort of vibrations or bumps. Whereas on legacy mounts, this lever over here, first of all, it's made of plastic. It also only locks in via friction. So I can actually use my hands here to manually adjust the height of this mount. So if you take any bumps or if you're in a situation with a lot of vibrations, that might be something to consider. So let's get into the two most interesting things of this mount. First off, this mount is designed to be very future forward. As we've talked with Nocturn at SHOT Show and when we went to visit them last fall, they said there's going to be power provisions for this mount in the future with their goggles. So if you see on the bottom, there's little holes here for a power pass-through. Eventually, sometime in the undetermined future, Nocturn will release onboard power for their goggles, and this will connect to a battery pack. So if you take the goggle off, it will not have power. If you put it on, it will have power. much like a lot of ball detent mounts you see out there right now. So that's going to be a dealer level modification according to the last conversation I had with Nocturn, and that is going to be coming later on when it's ready with the goggles to support it. Now, the most interesting part of this mount to me, and I'm a pretty huge nerd when it comes to making sure my mount's nice and tight, is going to be the hinge itself. So this mount has the same style push to deploy button and push to stow button as many mounts there on the market right now. As you can see on the bottom here, there is basically a latch that latches on into a little notch so it's locked into position. Very, very minimal wobble here. And if I were to pull this down and push the button, as you can see, it comes down and up like that. However, there is an additional way that they reduce wobble, because legacy systems that use that barrel, drum, and a pin system like this guy over here, you develop wobble over time because oftentimes that pin is going to be steel and that drum is going to be aluminum. Steel is obviously much harder and much more wear resistant than aluminum is. So often over time, the steel pin wears away the aluminum drum, and that aluminum drum doesn't become super, super useful because it's just worn out so much. And that's how you get that really unfixable wobble that you see on other mounts out there. Nocturn has done something really smart with their mount, where they have two ball bearings on springs inside the hinge of this alpha mount. So I've actually taken this mount apart. I don't recommend you doing it, but you can if you want. But there's two ball bearings here that detent into these holes, and that's going to wear much, much slower and much more evenly than a pin and a drum that you might see on other mounts. These spring detents give it a lot of force, so when you push the locking bar down, you actually need to push this down, and then it locks into place over there as well via these two ball bearings that kind of roll in this triangular pattern. Another thing you could do is when you take this mount apart, again, I don't really suggest it because it is a lot of small parts, but Nocturn says you can do it. You can actually convert this to a force to overcome mount, which I haven't done it on this video, but I actually kind of prefer because it's a much simpler operation. And if I were to hold the button down here to simulate that, you can see that it actually has quite a bit of force that I need to overcome it, and then it springs into position with those very, very strong double detents. Additionally, they've really thought of everything on this mount. You can actually go in there and use a tiny Allen key to adjust the screws that are pushing on the springs of the ball bearings to increase or decrease the detent pressure. Again, this is all a little bit complicated to do. There are a lot of moving parts in there, and if you've ever done anything with ball bearings before, don't lose them. But you can turn this into a force to overcome mount, and you can adjust the detent pressure on the mount. They've really thought of you guys out there that want to customize your mount and have a very comprehensive, long-lasting mount. So as you use this thing, as it wears, as you use it in a harsh condition, as this gets banged up in storage and all that stuff, you can quite literally tighten almost every little aspect of it to compensate for that wear. So that's it. I know I just probably spent a long time talking about a cool piece of aluminum and very well designed piece of aluminum to attach your nods on, but there it is, the Nocturn Industries Alpha mount, a very forward-thinking mount, arguably one of the coolest night vision mounts out there on the market today. And I honestly think this is going to be a great mount for all you night vision guys out there. Well, it's really industrial looking.
Get the back in the cage.
Good?